Today I'm talking about how observing our thoughts can be helpful in realizing our own self. Our own self is not the same as our personal self. The personal self refers to the body mind persona system or ego personality, which encompasses various things such as our physical body, family, friends, occupation, habits, interests, opinions, memories, and so on. All that an individual is made of from the standpoint of the world. World's standpoint means a transactional standpoint involving a give and take of objects. Realizing your own self means realizing your essential nature, which some refer to as Atma or soul. But we do not directly experience the Atma or soul. However, we are aware that the body mind is conscious of what is happening inside us, such as thoughts and feelings. So we should be able to experience what we essentially are. For that, we need to do self inquiry and look within the body mind persona to find the fundamental element. The fundamental element means that which truly exists. If we examine ourselves deeply, we can see that the body has been constantly changing. The body takes birth one day, then goes through the stages of childhood, adulthood, and old age. Similarly, the mind keeps changing. It is a cluster of thought, feeling, perception, which are constantly forming and dissolving. So, mind does not exist in real terms. Moreover, when we go into deep sleep, we do not experience the thoughts and feelings. Mind is experienced in waking and dream states, but not in deep sleep. So, mind does not truly exist. In other words, body and mind appear to be existing, but actually they do not exist. We can observe that something remains present within us, even during deep sleep state, despite the fact that our body mind are asleep. For example, if someone were to call out to us with a loud sound while we were in deep sleep, we would wake up. So, what was it that heard the sound? It is our true self, which is always present even when our body and mind are asleep. This realization is an important step in spiritual practice. Even when our body and mind are asleep, our true self remains awake and aware. We can infer that body and mind arise from something deeper within us, something that is beyond the persona, something fundamental in us, in which all the movements are happening, but which itself is unaffected by those movements. Sage Ramana called this deeper entity as self. He taught that self itself appears as thought, feeling, and sensation, and self itself is the body. Self itself is the I thought or the aham that runs the ego personality. Today, we are focusing on how to realize the self in its pure form from within the body mind persona. Sage in the book Maharshi Gospel explains that um, the purity of ego personality. So, what ego personality really is? Sage says that the ego in its purity is experienced in the intervals between two thoughts. The ego is like the worm which leaves one hold only after it catches another. Its true nature is when it is out of contact with thoughts. Sage guides us to realize this interval as the true being. So, what we draw from the teaching? The teaching tells that we can experience our true self as the interval between the thoughts. Let's imagine we don't get any thoughts. Then the thought free space that remains is your own self. That is what you fundamentally are. Now, the most important question is, do we experience any interval between thoughts? And if we do experience, what is that like? Normally, we don't get to experience the interval because the stream of thoughts never stops. What we need to do is to go close to a thought and examine carefully where the thought comes from and into which it dissolves. Sometimes the flow of thoughts can be so powerful that it can be difficult for us to perceive the underlying space in which they are flowing. However, with diligent effort, we can observe the thought and become aware of the space underlying it, both within and around the thought. Although this space may be hidden beneath the constant mental chatter that occupies our minds, it is always there. When we become aware of the space between thoughts, we realize that the space is still. It's like an emptiness. We experience a deeper stillness and presence within us, beyond our thoughts and mental activity. Thus, self realization involves becoming aware of the space underlying our thoughts. By doing so, we realize that our thoughts are not the only things that exist in our minds. The space is the fundamental thing, as that remains even when thoughts are not present. Spiritual practice requires us to be present and aware of the space around our thoughts and the underlying stillness that exists within us. As we pay attention to the space underlying the thoughts and around the thoughts, we can detect that the space is not just within us, but is also present around the body mind. You will also discover that the space contains not just our body mind, but all other entities also lie in the space. The space is not divided among them. Everyone exists in the space. To stay connected with the space, set aside some time each day to be present in it. When we focus solely on thoughts, we tend to ignore the space within and around us and miss out on a deeper sense of presence. Also, we often have no sense of the presence of space outside our bodies or any objects we perceive. Uh, Here, I'm not referring to the physical space that exists around objects. I am talking about the stillness space that is omnipresent, and every physical activity occurs in it. For example, you may notice there is a space in between two sounds. So, all subtle movements also arise in the space, such as thoughts and feelings. They arise and they dissolve in it. Even the physical space containing all gross objects and their interactions arises from it. In fact, the entire universe arises from it. As we practice paying attention to the space, we become much more aware of it. And whatever comes in the foreground is not hindering our attention to the space from which it arises. By practicing awareness and paying attention to the space, we can develop a habit of staying as stillness. See how the thoughts are arising and realize that awareness of thoughts does not have to take you away from being present. This is where spiritual practice becomes more about awareness of the space around thoughts and underlying the thoughts. As the practice matures, each time we are aware of something like a thought, an object, we become more aware of the space around it. This doesn't mean that we need to get rid of our thoughts, but rather we acknowledge their impermanence and focus on the space that surrounds them. Try it. You will find that everything happens in space. To reach the natural state of self absorption, we need to remain in the space while functioning in the world and playing our roles as expected of us. This means being absorbed in stillness while completing tasks with proper attention and without identifying with them. In the natural state, we are no longer bound by our identification with thoughts and emotions. We recognize the impermanence of these fleeting experiences, and instead we focus on the underlying stillness that exists within us and around us. By remaining in this space, we can perform our duties with a clear and focused mind, free from the distractions of ego. So, the key is to maintain this awareness of the space while still participating fully in the world around us. With practice, we can achieve a state of balance where we are fully present in the moment while also fulfilling our responsibilities as individuals. How should we begin the practice? You may do it like a daily exercise. Try to reach the interval between two thoughts and stay there for 10 seconds. With practice, you can gradually increase the duration of your stay in the interval. The key is to give total attention to when one thought ends and another thought begins, as the interval between thoughts is where we can experience stillness. However, this interval may disappear quickly as the next thought emerges. At first, you may find it difficult to notice the interval, but as you become aware of it, you can learn to stay in it for longer periods of time. To practice this, shift your attention from the stream of thoughts to the interval. Focus on the stillness between the thoughts rather than thoughts themselves. Ask yourself, where am I? Am I actually in the interval or with the thoughts? When you are truly in the interval, you will experience thought free stillness. By practicing this exercise regularly, you can learn to access the stillness that exists within you, even in the midst of constant stream of thoughts and distractions. Over time, you can cultivate a greater sense of presence and awareness in your daily life. Thank you.